Hello, come on in.
What office is this I'm in?
This is the director's office.
You're Director Priest, is that right?
I am director. I am director priest, and I'm here to help any afflictions that you may or may not have.
Got this weird kind of like cramp in my elbow. I've been playing a lot of tennis. I don't know if that would have contributed to it or not. Or
I mean, it can greatly. I mean, how much tennis are we talking?
I probably play tennis about it's usually like against the wall, so by myself. So about like 9 to 5, Monday to Friday kind of thing. I treat it as a job basically.
It's a lot of tennis. It's a lot of tennis, and I'm surprised that you don't have another job that will uses your time. But if you can dedicate this amount of time to tennis,
I'm independently wealthy actually. I have rich parents, so it's all right. So I can just do that all day.
That may be the problem. Like hitting the ball against the actual court, it represents a certain amount of lack of purpose.
Oh wow! I mean, I just came in here because my elbow was hurting, but you're telling me that I've got some deeper issues I need to sort out.
I mean, we all have deeper issues we need to sort out to begin with.
Right. I don't know. You are my second consultation, if I'm honest. The first one said it was probably tennis elbow.
So you play a lot of tennis. Do you do anything else?
Yeah, I play a lot of tennis. I'm listening to like postmodern audiobooks while I'm doing it, and they kind of stress me out quite a bit. You know, a bit of pinching, a bit of DFW, a bit of diddly-lo.
The trifecta, the classic.
Director, what is it that you think I have?
I think you have a terrible, terrible case of PTASD.
What does that stand for?
It stands for Paul Thomas Anderson Syndrome Disorder.
Why would there be both a syndrome and a disorder in the name of the illness?
I'm the doctor. I'm the doctor here. The doctor here. You came to me.
Is it terminal?
There's only one cure: to watch all of his films and then talk about him in a podcast format.
But wouldn't that be unbearably cringy and no one will want to listen to it?
That is a risk you'll just have to take.
I can't sleep cause there's a war zone in my head. How am I supposed to have fun? All my friends are dead. I got PTASD. Paul Thomas Anderson Syndrome Disorder.
It's 1977. The original Star Wars has just come out. We're in the San Fernando Valley, and we've got all our characters. So should we go through the characters to start with?
There's so many characters.
I'd say the four mains are the kind of father, mother. It's the kind of the nuclear family, isn't it? The father would be Jack Horner, who's played by Burt Reynolds.
He is a porn director, but he sort of sees it as a slightly higher art form, I suppose, than a lot of porn directors. And his main goal is to sort of make a theatrical worthy porn film, one that has a proper plot, has good directing, has good acting. As you said, he's very much the father figure, and Mark Wahlberg's character very much looks up to him.
He's older. I think he knows he's kind of past his prime, and he's not he's very happy for his wife, who's played by Julianne Moore, to kind of go off and have sex with other men, maybe as long as it's on camera.
Partly the levels of reality are slightly askew about the whole thing in terms of on and off camera. I kind of sort of saw their relationship as this, at least an attempt of being sort of seeing sex as sort of a lesser thing, I guess.
Yeah, so that's the core of the film, is trying to treat sex as this very matter-of-fact thing, as like just this thing that happens. And then where the conflict lies is that once you do that for a while, it starts to kind of prey on you, and you have to find other ways to escape, which is why most of them are looking for bad routes of getting money by the end of the film. So he starts then as this kind of prolific director.
Well, I always assumed that he was like a relatively big shot in porn, but like, as you said, sort of a slightly waning figure.
But then we see him over the course of the film kind of accept that these more kind of arty kinds of porn films are not going to be released in theaters anymore, probably due to the invention of video cassettes and the internet and stuff, and it starts to fade away. And then he turns to shooting in a car by the end of the film, isn't he?
Oh yeah, and that's just a very, very depressing scene where he's just with Roller Girl trying to get a random girl on the street to sleep with her.
That's the same guy who makes the blowjob motion at her early in the film. Did it?
I didn't actually notice that. No, I've seen it 3 times.
That was a second viewing thing for me, but I did watch them quite close together. But I guess we can move on to Roller Girl then. I don't think she gets a proper name, although he does call her Brandy. And there's a shot early on when they do a close-up of the Polaroid camera, she's put an R over the P, so it says Rolleroid.
I did not notice that either.
It's like a split-second thing. This kind of movie, I think, really rewards repeat viewings. And
the level of detail in this, I think, is just staggering. it's one of those films where you can just really go back to.
I would say it's perfect. Everything, you know why it's there, and it makes you feel something, or it progresses the plot. There's nothing that's kind of extraneous or unnecessary. Like, even though it's 2.5 hours, it's still like a very succinct film in the story that it's telling, in the characters it's trying to describe.
He's one of the strengths of Paul Thomas Anderson. I think he's very good at keeping momentum going. He's got that vibe of sort of like characters just existing in a space, and the fact that you can keep that and still be very punchy and just.
And he got he got a nomination for an Oscar for his writing on this film. There were 3 Oscar nominations for this film. What do you think they were?
Cinematography, and then writing, I guess. And
Yes, the screenplay was one of them. So Paul Thomas Anderson, who wrote the film, got a screenplay nomination for that.
Cinematography, not one?
No, that was not. I don't know how this game works because I just invented it. Think more in terms of maybe performances.
I reckon best lead actress for Julianne Moore.
Yeah, she was supporting actress.
Yeah, so best supporting actress for Julianne Moore. Another performance, maybe Burt Reynolds.
Yeah, that was the third one. So yeah, well done. And how many of those do you think it won out of the 3?
I reckon it didn't win any of them.
Yeah, you're right. It didn't win any of the awards. So let's have a look at what they lost to then. Best supporting actor. You know, Robbie Forster. Apparently, I called him
Jackie Brown. Yes.
He died fairly recently. He also plays the vacuum repairman on Breaking Bad, the guy who takes Walter White away to his little cabin at the end of...
Oh, shit, yes, he did, yeah.
The winner was Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting. Think he deserves it over Burt Reynolds then?
I think he did do a very good performance. I reckon he probably did deserve it over Burt Reynolds.
There were talks behind the scenes that Burt Reynolds was apparently on a lot of drugs while they were filming. I don't know if you know that much about Burt Reynolds' career, but he was a very popular, like, pretty mainstream action star. So to star in this film about like porn, it was a really big turn for him. And when he saw an early release of the film, he apparently said, I hate this film, I wish I hadn't agreed to do it and stuff. He apparently got into a fight with Paul Thomas Anderson on set and was like threatening to throw a punch at him.
It's a great part.
It's a perfect performance. But I think that's because he's been really well cast, but I don't think he really understands the film he's in, if you get me. Like, the most extreme thing he says is, aim it at a tit, Eddie. I'd say that's probably the most extreme thing he's privy to. It starts with this very contemplative evening scene, like this one where it follows them around the restaurant, and like, so you're trying to figure out who this guy is and like why he's kind of this older man who's like looking for something to do, some kind of purpose, and hanging out in this bar.
Essentially, his original vision for Boogie Nights was as a mockumentary kind of thing, like Spinal Tap, and then he was going to turn it into a longer thing, which was going to be a mockumentary, which he spent like years on doing, and then he decided that the whole idea of like mockumentary had kind of been played out, so he scrapped all that, and that's when he decided to do Boogie Nights. Which
is interesting because Hard 8 was also based on a short film, and then we'll watch Magnolia next, obviously, and that's going to be the first kind of one, I think, that's based on nothing that came before, so it's kind of more his own vision with money and like unlimited potential to do whatever he wants. Because even this, as I was saying, had some kind of studio interference where he had at least 40 more minutes of scenes. Thomas Jane's character could have had a much bigger part than he does. The dancer that helps them set up the robbery at the end.
He is very much a tacked-on character compared to most of the other ones, definitely.
It was because he first appears in the scene where the 80s are kind of introduced, and that's where, I mean, you kind of get a glimpse of the underbelly before. Like, it all seems very kind of positive and fun, and then there's that one like split-second thing, and they get rid of it very quickly, where one of the girls is overdosing.
What is interesting about it is basically while they're in the 70s and they're beginning to do their big, they're filming all the stuff, and Dirk Diggler's becoming really successful, there is still this constant undercurrent of everything that bad's going to happen anyway. Was it his name Bill Thompson, whose wife is just having sex with people around him, and that stuff's already happening. There's this idea in the film that like the 80s are like this big problem where everything sort of begins, but it's really just the culmination of all the stuff that's really happened anyway. You can kind of sort of see the film as like this sort of karmic retribution kind of thing, where it's just like this inevitability of their lives. Some of the characters have this whole idea of blaming digitization of stuff and how the 80s have moved on, and they're becoming these waning figures.
Yeah, but then you do have those characters like Don Cheadle's character. We should talk about. He's the guy who starts off playing a cowboy.
Oh, I love him
in the stereo shop. The first time we see him, it's like this great introductory scene where he's like, is he in the first shot actually?
I thought it's when he's just selling stereo. I can't quite remember.
I think he might be, because I remember watching this, and most of the actors have like, or more recently blown up. Like Don Cheadle is obviously War Machine from the Marvel movies and stuff. And he's a lot bigger now than he was. And all the actors have done that. You see all these people and you're like, that's a really famous actor. In the same way, like Gwyneth Paltrow in the film before, she wouldn't have been that famous then. But seeing it now, you're like, oh shit, that's Gwyneth Paltrow. And that kind of like takes you out of it a bit. But you see Don Cheadle in this first scene. He's trying to sell a stereo system, and he's using country to sell the stereo systems to people. And his boss comes over and he's like, no one wants country anymore, man. Like, and that's like a microcosm of the whole film, isn't it? Like,
there's this idea that no matter what you can do, they've entered into this life, they become sort of tainted, can't really get away from it. And he does, I guess, in the end, but only through this very drastic,
crazy scene. Like, he gets turned down from the bank and he goes to buy these donuts, and they show his pregnant wife just seeing Dirk get beaten up by a load of homophobes, and Roller Girl like shove her skate into the head of some guy. Normal scene where he's coming into this donut shop and he asks for 12 donuts and he's very slowly picking them up, and like it's a really cool shot like through the counter and you can see him through the glass, and this guy comes in and there's this massive shootout which felt a little Tarantino to me, and then he's like in this white suit covered in blood, this really distinctive image, and they're all dead. And then it cuts to the money on the floor, and it's like a pool of blood, like getting closer to it. He's got this decision: am I going to take the money or am I going to wait for the police? And so he's the one character I think who gets a proper happy ending.
At the end of it, I guess it doesn't end too bad for Dirk, relatively speaking. Like, yeah, he's back to doing porn and stuff. It doesn't seem... I felt Dirk's was like a not a terrible...
Yeah, so I guess we're still doing this character thing where we go through them. So if we talk about Dirk at the start, he's working this kind of shitty restaurant job as a waiter and paying people to watch him jerk off for, it's $10, isn't it?
10, and
Watch
then it's
him
like
jerk
20 if you want to touch it or something. What was it?
Start, it's 10 if you want to watch me jerk off, 5 if you just want to see it. And then later on, he's in the car with the homophobe, and the guy's like, I want to watch you jerk off. And he's like, that'll be $20. And he's like, I've only got 10. And he accepts that, and it kind of shows him regressing back to who he was before. He gets beaten by Burt Reynolds, and instantly there's this kind of magic to him, and this, though, like a one special thing that I'm good at, I'm able to do is to have a really big penis and be great at sex.
Everyone's incredibly impressed by the fact that just this guy who's like relatively charismatic and like good on camera, but the main thing is he's just got this fucking huge long, and everyone's just very impressed with him for a while, until they're not.
He's kind of taken advantage of in a way, I'd say, the whole time. Even when he's pitching his film, like he's doing it for the right reasons. He's like, I want to make a proper action film. Like, he's been inspired by all these like 80s action heroes to be like, I want to be the star of my own film. Obviously people only really watching it because there's sex in it, and I feel like both him and John C. Reilly's character are like stuck in their adolescence, and like when Dirk is like showing Julianne Moore around his flat, and he's like, look at this, what I've got, and it's like all the classic like teenage boy stuff you do if you had like the ideal teenage boy house, like the massive TV and like the Japanese room for karate and the red like Corvette in the garage and stuff.
Well, and also their like whole attempt to like a rock and roll career after their porn sort of career dries up, these completely deluded characters.
And that's how I feel. I might edit in like a clip of us trying to record music when we're a little pissed as well into the segment, because every time we do that after watching Boogie Nights, that's the only way I can see it as now, is like just baby. It's clearly supposed to be intentionally bad in the same way like the action movie kind of B movie riffs are supposed to be bad as well.
They're having fun at least.
And that's Robert Downey Sr. is the guy who refuses to give them their tapes back.
I didn't know he was an actor.
Well, why else would Robert Downey Jr. be called Robert Downey Jr.?
Why is Kurt Vonnegut called Kurt Vonnegut Jr.? I don't know.
Is he Kurt Vonnegut Jr.?
Yeah.
But that's not like his stage name. Like when you buy a Kurt Vonnegut book, it doesn't say Kurt Vonnegut Jr. on it.
I've got a copy of Mother Night in front of me right now, and it says Kurt Vonnegut Jr.
But is that like an old copy? When was that published?
This is an old copy. This was like 75.
Did that belong to your parents then?
I just bought it online because it was £2.
Once I'm earning a little check making teaching, I just want to become a book collector and just buy lots of really old books that will probably turn to dust as soon as I touch them, but at least I'll see them for a second and be able to enjoy them.
Closer, baby, be my lover, nature lady, earth mother, climate changing and it's burning me up, but it's too much for me, I'm in a funk, yeah!
And I feel like Boogie Nights probably did get overshadowed because it is so out there and explicit. You can see like the conservative Oscar judges at the time being like, yeah, we can't really give an award and legitimize this horrible film.
I definitely think it was, in terms of screenplay, I think it definitely should have won over Good Will Hunting. I do like Good Will Hunting, but I think it's definitely not as tight or as interesting. Like, I feel this film's quite well structured.
I mean, every character in Boogie Nights, like the second they come onto screen, you know who they are and like what they're going to be. Like when Philip Seymour Hoffman, when he first comes onto screen, it's literally as they bring out this spasming girl who's overdosed on cocaine and has been taken to hospital, and Philip Seymour Hoffman walks in and you're like, is that Philip Seymour Hoffman? And from the next scene, you know exactly who he's going to be. You know he's going to be into Mark Wahlberg, and you know Mark Wahlberg is going to be too kind of like, he has too big a case of the non-gays to ever kind of relate to this guy. And
I think he's amazing in most films he's in, but I really like him. I think he plays this very tragic character very well. He's like this bit player in this much bigger story.
This doting fanboy of Mark Wahlberg. Is that one always following down the corridor, and he's like he lets him go in front down the stairs so he can stare his ass, and then he runs down like to open the door and like be like, oh, I'm such a good friend for you. And obviously we end with him kissing Mark Wahlberg on New Year's Eve.
Essentially the 80s is the threshold where everything sort of the artifice of what they build up sort of falls away. That New Year's Eve party is when Mark Wahlberg does coke for the first time, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And then obviously after that he becomes really addicted and his dick doesn't work. All very sad.
Why is it sad if a dick doesn't work?
Well, I was thinking more his whole life falls apart, but I suppose the dick is representative of his life falling apart.
You know, Turing committed suicide after he got castrated because he couldn't have sex anymore. So it's a big deal.
That is true. It was very sad. So the last sort of the big four characters we haven't talked about will be Julianne Moore.
She's introduced with Burt Reynolds, but she doesn't really.
Oh yes. She's at the show. She's at the beginning of the film with him.
They go home and he kind of goes for a drink and sits in the lounge of his mansion, and she's upstairs like doing pills, like ground up pills, and she tries to call her son.
Oh yes.
Like don't call it this hour. Don't call it this hour. And then the next time we kind of hear about this son subplot is when Luis Guzman picks up the phone and it's the father, and they say, is she here? Is she here? And he kind of passes the phone around and sees if she's here, and she's not. And there's that one chance to talk to her son, kind of ruined by the fact that she's doing so much coke and partying and stuff.
Her essential, what she wants as a character is to be a mother. So she's a mother to sort of all the people in the porn industry that she works with, mainly like Dirk Diggler and Roller Girl. There's the courtroom scene that happens. It's basically decided that dad gets full custody and she gets no part. Essentially, everything that she sort of works for doesn't really work out at all.
And then that's that scene where she and Roller Girl, they're both doing coke together, and they're clearly just doing drugs and like trying to stave off this kind of like thing that's crashing down on them. She says to her, like in this moment of desperation, like, can you just call me your mum? Can you please just be my mother? She's like, yes, of course I can. And it's horrible, and that's juxtaposed with the scene of John C. Reilly and Mark Wahlberg trying to record their thing, and like they cut between the two of them, both these men kind of like at the end of their like ambitions, and these women kind of also running out of stuff to do as well, and
trying to sort of work out what to do when the party stopped. We sort of left with the same despair you had before, where you've been trying to sort of cover up or do things, and then you just can't sort of escape the sort of reality that you created because you haven't done anything to avoid it.
And then Burt Reynolds starts to bring in kind of this, I called him like the discount Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, Johnny Doe, and he's the new guy, and he sort of takes over. Dirk is becoming more violent and difficult to work with, and
he's doing so much coke, and he's like trying to hype himself up in the mirror and get an erection, but he just can't. And he goes to Burt Reynolds like, I've got one now, we need to go now. And he's like, babe, give me 20 minutes. Burt Reynolds is so fucking cool in this film. Like every scene he's in, he's just kind of like one of the things I thought watching this, like over the course of this film, which probably stretches about like five years, would you say, something like that?
Yeah.
Who has been the most happy like over the time? And I think I would say Burt Reynolds, because at the start he's kind of looking for a new star, and at the end he's kind of got this family together, and like the whole time he's making himself happy.
For the most part, obviously there's a lot of bad things that happen to him, but he's much less, I suppose he's less personally damaged by sort of the coming of the 80s and sort of culmination of this lifestyle. Like there's like his ego's definitely bruised with like the end of film. What he has to reconcile with is becoming this less important figure, and he's no longer the imagined like quote unquote real director who wants to make these real films with actors and good dialogue that's also a porn film. So I guess in that sense that's where like his damage comes from.
And we have the guy from Hard 8 who makes an appearance in Boogie Nights, Philip Baker Hall.
Yes. When is he in Boogie Nights, actually?
He's the guy who, at the eve of the 80s, they're meeting with him, and he says to Burt Reynolds, like, you need to start doing video. You need to stop caring about the art and kind of just get more commercial, because all people want to see is, like, fucking, basically, and, like, easy recorded fucking.
Whip it out and get it done quickly, whereas films, all this extra faff about it.
And he has a line about liking butter in his ass or something. Like, he has a weird kind of throwaway line that you can see the Colonel laughing at in the background, which is bad, of course, when you realize the Colonel is a paedophile.
Colonel is a paedophile. So the Colonel's like, he's the main backer of the Burt Reynolds films to begin with, isn't he? And he sort of remains the backer for a long time, and then eventually he goes to prison because he has quite a bit of child pornography on him, and you sort of get that scene where he
starts to tell that story, and he's like, I took a girl back and she took too much coke, and Burt Reynolds is kind of watching, like, knowing there's something more, and then he kind of comes out and he's like, yeah, and there were these younger girls, and he tries to justify it to himself, and he's like, I never touched them, I just had pictures of them and videos of them.
Quite a disturbing little scene for him, and then he's basically out.
Which Burt Reynolds hangs up on him, and he's saying like, are you still my friend? Are you still my friend? But you can't hear him. And then the last we see of the Colonel is when he's getting beaten up, like right at the end of the film, by his cellmate. Obviously, if you go to jail as someone who's done that kind of stuff, you're not gonna.
Yeah, it doesn't work out well for you.
Take your time. Start over again, Bob.
Humphrey, what are you saying?
What are you saying, Jeff?
What are you saying, Bob?
What are you saying?
I'll tell you one scene I really appreciated in the film. When I first watched it, I just found it very funny. Is the very last shot where they actually show Dirk Diggler's penis. His penis is in a sense like the center of the film. Really, everything sort of revolves around it in some way.
Which is why I think it's the last shot, isn't it? Like, it's just gonna the culmination of everything we've seen before is this.
And I was just surprised they actually like bothered to make a prosthetic.
No, it was a rubber prosthetic, and he's actually said afterwards that he kept it and it was not made of like long-lasting materials, which I guess is good for the environment, really.
Yeah.
But it's now started to deteriorate. So even the best penis in the world, Dirk Diggler's penis, is now starting to melt away.
It's awfully symbolic, really, isn't it? Nightmare.
What would you say? Because a lot of people have said, because this film is obviously, I would say, perfect. Paul Thomas Anderson doesn't do sequels, but what would you say a sequel would look like?
I'll preface this by saying that I don't think Boogie Nights is the sort of film that kind of needs a sequel. But I can't really think of one that doesn't end up repeating a lot of the same themes as the original film, which I know is kind of an inevitability of sequels, but you do want them to grow in some way. So in my 2-minute elevator pitch.
So we're in an elevator, and I'm an executive. I'm Mr. Big Shot.
I'm plucky upstart.
Walking into the elevator, we get in. What floor would you like to go to?
The very top.
Oh, that's where I'm going. So clearly a high-class customer. I'll just press the button now. I reckon go in this elevator so much, so I know how long it takes to get to the top, and I'd say about 2 minutes. So that's how long you have to make this pitch to me. Wait, did someone say something about a pitch? Is that happening?
It is. So Boogie Nights.
I just assumed you look desperate, so I assume you're trying to make me a pitch too.
I've never been more desperate.
Okay.
So
sequel. I'll press the button now.
Doing like a sequel to Boogie Night. One way you could sort of approach it is this whole like cyclical idea of a history repeating itself. Of course, now you don't have the idea of digitized from film to digital media. You have the idea of sort of the rise of the internet and sort of the fracturization of the film industry into all these desperate parts that don't really have any connection with each other. I guess what you could do is you could do something about sort of becoming attached to these ideas of this golden age of the 70s, which was where, so you could see him maybe trying to sort of recapture that sort of magic. The porn landscape has so changed, and there isn't really this bunch of porn directors making films together. It's all about amateurs and nothing's really connected with each other. So he's this desperate character who tries to sort of become this version of Burt Reynolds, but he doesn't have the charisma or intelligence to really carry it out. So that would be the premise of the film. What do you think, Mr. Big Shot?
I think we've still got 20 floors to go before I get to the top. And I can get off this elevator.
That's my theory. I don't, to be honest, I don't think there should be a sequel to Boogie Nights.
You know what, kid? You got the goods.
Turns out it's very easy to get a screenplay. Thank
Yeah, you
God
just
for
have to
that.
have the right kind of connections and networking, and get in the elevator with the right person, and you can sell anything, even a piece of shit. So did we talk about Don Cheadle as a pharaoh? They just cut to him in a party, and his whole thing before then has been like, I need to find a new look, and he's just sitting there as a sad pharaoh.
He wants to be a cowboy, that's why. He wants to be a cowboy. Is that so wrong?
Got to adapt with the times, and he tries to do that by going into the past, which was the worst decision.
Don Cheadle is honestly probably one of my favourite parts. Him, John C. Reilly, and Philip Seymour Hoffman are my favourite characters in this film.
And talking about happiness, like I think John C. Reilly throughout this film, Paul Thomas Anderson said about this that in most films, like there's some kind of arc where the characters turn 90 degrees and they start as one thing and end as another thing. And he said he wanted his characters not to change at all and kind of at most just turn 1 degree. I think John C. Reilly is just such a good example of that because we're introduced to him and he's at this party, he's like making margaritas. He's like all he's interested with Mark Wahlberg is like how much they bench together.
Yeah.
And then he's like, say how much you bench at the same time. 1, 2, 3. And neither of them say anything. He's like, you didn't say anything. You didn't say anything. And immediately this friendship is just formed. Characters connect so well and they have such good chemistry. And he's doing like magic tricks where he like pours the champagne and it's hanging off his wrist. And then at the end of the film, he is a magician as well.
He is a magician.
Doing like a slightly kind of pervy live show as well, where this girl gets the tits out and it's kind of, you can see the appeal is not fully the magic, but at the same time, like the magic is part of it. So he's kind of made something out of himself more than...
He's a very much a not tragic character, which is rare for this film. Most of them are. I mean, it began with him being basically all right and ends with him being basically all right. Sort of aspects in between where things get a bit worse, but that's mainly just because he's following around dirt.
And like Roller Girl goes through some shit, but she does, like, she's back in the school at the end of it.
I think she gets a GED, doesn't she? How would you rank them in, I imagine, better than Hard 8?
So far, I'd say, as I think you would as well, Boogie Nights, and then below it, Hard 8. But I think that's a big revelation. Like,
I'm very impressed. The fact that Hard 8 came out a year before Boogie Nights, I just think is incredible. It feels like Boogie Nights, I feel, just such a confident film. He very much knows what he's doing in terms of writing and directing. There's such a big film and there's so much stuff happening, but it's so like I think Hard 8 is well executed, but it's so small and kind of safe in comparison. I feel this isn't a safe film. I think he really just threw everything he had at the wall, and luckily everything just seemed to stick.
And then like final segment I'd say would be like how many things you see here are present in some of his other films as well. Like the cutaways from Hard 8, they did cutaways in this as well. Cut away to the Boogie Nights sign at the start, and then they cut away when Dirk Diggler's describing Mark Wahlberg saying like, this is my character's name. They cut away to a big sign of Dirk Diggler and like there are fireworks going off.
As you said, the whole idea of the characters changing a bit but not massively. Definitely like the long tracking shots, especially the opening shot.
Very objective view of something, like trying to capture a whole kind of atmosphere or scene and not. And the thing, like when I first started watching this day, I compared it to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and because it's the same kind of idea of like trying to capture this earlier scene. I think the female characters in this are a lot more fleshed out than Margot Robbie in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
You don't really see her as a character, you kind of see her as this looming threat that's going to happen in Hollywood.
Yeah, like she's more kind of like an icon than a real person.
I didn't really know anything about the Manson murders when I watched. I just thought it was this really random, so it felt very pointless until Meg told me afterwards what the actual story was.
And another trope of Paul Thomas Anderson is the one scene characters. So there's the guy, Alfred Molina, right at the end, plays the drug dealer in like the dressing gown. And also played Dr. Octopus. And he's just incredible. Like that's such a vivid like performance. Like that stuck with me so much. But he does a hit of crack and he says, "You guys play baseball." What do you think he's saying there?
You might be talking about drugs.
Freebase is the term they use to refer to inhaling cocaine in a pipe.
I did not know that.
Like it's right at the end of the film. They're all washed up and they're trying to make a last little money. So they pour a load of flour into a bag and they take it to this drug dealer's apartment who they vaguely know through this dancer, and they're trying to get $5,000 for it. And they get there and the drug dealer's really friendly and he's like inviting them in.
It all sort of falls apart, and then as it falls apart there's a big shootout and he gets the shotgun out shooting at them, and isn't the reason it goes wrong is because Todd tries to steal more money out of them as well.
They're all hanging out there and they've got the money and it's like, we need to leave, and Mark Wahlberg is saying like, we need need to leave, we need to leave. And he's like, Thomas Jane goes up to the thing and he's like, I'm gonna steal what's in your floor safe. You've got so much money and coke in there.
There's a massive shootout, and then Todd gets killed. Reed managed to escape.
And there's a really good like moment with the score where it starts with the same kind of thing it started with, where Burt Reynolds is walking and there's this long tracking shot and there's this great synthy score, I would say, as it's following him around, and it kind of kicks in and you see all these characters. They've made their mistakes and they've recovered from them, and they're now just kind of hanging out together, and all they have is the friendships they've made throughout the course of this thing.
Ends up okay. Ends up relatively okay.
It does end up okay.
No one but the addict knows their habits extend. They call you out so you build your soul around contempt. And there are fears that consuming all that you do. Tears will be falling and they'll be all about you. It all comes from playing the hand that you were dealt. The guise of normalcy is starting to melt. I'm not looking for closure, just looking for a second to regain composure. This conversation before lost track of what you're blaming me for. Lost track of what you're blaming me for.
I've spilled beer on my guitar, but apart from that, it's going swimmingly.
I'm at your door.
Oh, come on in. What's your affliction? What's wrong?
Things that used to bring me pleasure don't bring me pleasure anymore. No.
So I won't lie to you. It's a common affliction.
I watched Boogie Nights the other day, and it kind of made me think, like, why am I not, like, why was I not living in the 70s in the San Fernando Valley doing coke and hanging out and having sex with loads of beautiful young women? And
It's quite a simple solution. Have you not thought of it already?
no.
If you want to be better, start doing coke and get penis enlargement pills, and you'll be fine. At least until next week when we watch Magnolia.
And what, will I be cured once we've seen Magnolia?
Oh, you'll be much worse. It's a much sadder film.